Live from the studios of Access Channel 5 in Mayville, it's Senior Report with Reed Powers. Call in and participate in Chautauqua County's only live call-in senior program. Share a thought or wish someone a happy birthday. Saturday mornings between 9 and 10 a.m. And now, here's Reed Powers.
Got Greg Peterson here, who's going to give us some inside dope on a great Supreme Court justice and the one who ran the Nuremberg trials and many other things. There's actually a museum dedicated to him down there, and his name was
Robert Jackson.
Robert Jackson, who is famous worldwide, excepting up here, where he lived. We'll talk a little more about him.
Oh, I'm a Jamestown, New York native.
So you know Jamestown?
I know Jamestown very well.
Yeah, well, you remember when they used to call it Jamestown?
Being a good Swede, indeed. Yeah. I lived with that. Well, I'm the chairman of the board of the Robert H. Jackson Center, which was started in 2001. So we're a little more than 5 years old, and obviously designed to have expand and understand the legacy of Robert Jackson. If I might read a little bit about Justice Jackson and why we would celebrate the legacy of Justice Jackson. Here's a guy who was born in Warren County, Pennsylvania, Spring Creek Township, just over the border. If you go to the Deer Head Inn,
Stone's Throw.
That's where he was born. And at age 5, came into Chautauqua County. Moved to Frewsburg, and there he went through his high school career there. Came to Jamestown and did a postgraduate year in Jamestown High School. Then had the opportunity to study for the law. He did something which most people did not do, and is one of the last folks to actually study for the law. He never went to college. Had 1 year of law school, so he never graduated from law school. Then came back to Jamestown, 20 years as a practicing attorney here in Jamestown. And then from there, went on to public service. And he's an answer to a Jeopardy question, the Jeopardy question being who's the only individual to be a Solicitor General, Attorney General, and a Supreme Court Justice. It's our guy from Western New York, Robert Jackson, a guy who never went to college, spent only 1 year of law school, and is quite a unique personality, and right from here. I just want to pause and also reflect on the fact that we're here November 11th, Veterans Day. Time to pause, and certainly we reflect most recently on World War II veterans. And certainly Jackson's biggest claim to fame is being the chief American prosecutor at the Nuremberg war crimes trial, which was really the end of World War II.
They hung a bunch of Nazis, didn't they?
They tried, and Jackson was involved in the first case, and there was 21 Nazis tried. 3 of them were acquitted. 18 of them were convicted, and 12 of them were hanged. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Phillips Lytle, which is located in Jamestown, but is also has offices throughout New York State, Buffalo, Rochester.
You have one in Fredonia by chance?
We have one in Fredonia.
I bet an XDA probably could be over there.
Well, Tim Eads and Lori Militello are over there in our Fredonia offices, and it's been terrific. We merged with Jim Summer, Calisano Summer and Eads, some years ago. Jackson, it was not completely uncommon at the time where he would read for the law. He read for law with his mother's uncle. But again, had to take the bar exam, and at age 21, which is the earliest age possible, he passed the bar, and then became wonderfully involved in the community for 20 years.
Well, how did he get, now, don't let me stop you, but
sure.
How did he get to be a Supreme Court justice? I mean, some guy, some local kid, a country kid down here who didn't even go to law school or fiddled around for a few months, but how did he get to be a Supreme Court justice? That's unheard of, unbelievable. Well, he must have had a big in with somebody.
Well, he did, and it was President Roosevelt.
Okay, now what was his connection?
Yeah, 1911, when he was at Albany Law School, he was curious, went to the legislature, and there was a young state senator from Westchester County named Franklin Roosevelt.
Same name as the president.
That's right. And Robert Jackson, being a very much a devout Democrat in this area, an area which at the time had very few Democrats and certainly very few Democratic lawyers. They connected, they established a relationship, and during that entire period that Robert Jackson was practicing law in Jamestown, he kept very close ties with Franklin Roosevelt, who then became Governor Roosevelt. And then as the time progressed, 1932, of course, Franklin Roosevelt is elected president. In 1934, Franklin Roosevelt reaches out to his friend Robert Jackson and asks him to go to Washington to become counsel for what we now know as the Internal Revenue Service.
That made him popular.
That made him very popular. In fact, he was given a very unpopular task to prosecute Andrew Mellon.
Oh, boy.
Former Secretary of Treasury under Coolidge and Hoover on civil matters, and was successful. He cut his teeth winning that case. And
Andrew had to cough up $10 or something, probably.
Andrew Mellon had to cough up his entire art collection, which we now know as the National Art Gallery. There's a big plaque that says, delivered courtesy of the beneficence of Andrew Mellon. In reality, it was the settlement of a civil tax matter.
Or the slammer, right?
So Justice Jackson, or Bob Jackson at the time, was very much involved and responsible for what we see as the National Archive down there.
So he actually put the heat on Mellon to cough up the art, huh?
That's right. And from there, he became an assistant attorney general. Then he became Solicitor General. And
now, what's the difference? What's Solicitor General do?
Solicitor General argues on behalf of the United States on matters before the United States Supreme Court. And
Gonzalez wouldn't do that. He's just the
he's the Attorney
General, period, right?
That's right.
Right.
So as a Solicitor General, Jackson argued a number of cases before the United States Supreme Court and was so successful that Louis Brandeis, then Justice, suggested that Robert Jackson should be Solicitor General for life, which was a high accolade from Supreme Court Justice Brandeis. Then from there he became Attorney General, and as Attorney General this is a little World War II story. Prior to our entry into World War II, there was a lot of pressure by Winston Churchill to have Franklin Roosevelt participate in the war to assist them. Well, Roosevelt finally capitulated, and as we know, the Lend-Lease program Roosevelt instituted. That was based upon an opinion that Robert Jackson gave, an opinion of which he wrote in Jamestown, sitting on a park bench on Baker Street, that gave Roosevelt the authority to go ahead and proceed with the Lend-Lease program.
Which was a way of getting us into the war without getting us in the war.
Exactly.
We're producing massive amounts of weapons and machinery and everything for the war effort, but we're not involved technically. We're lending it to them.
Lending it to him, exactly. And he did, Franklin Roosevelt could do that through his executive powers, and that was really the opinion, which didn't have to go to the Congress. Well, that was Roosevelt. I think the key is that he did read for the law, which was a very permissible practice at the time. He could be tutored by a lawyer, and he did so by Benjamin Dean and Frank Mott in Jamestown. He then took the bar exam at the earliest age possible, at age 21, passed the bar exam, so he became a lawyer.
Okay, he did pass the bar, though.
That's correct. Well, we've been blessed by a lot of community support. We have memberships, we have annual funds, we have Robert Jackson Society memberships. We've been very blessed to have the assistance of Bill Parment, Kathy Young, the city of Jamestown, various municipal sources to assist us in the rebuild of and a refurbishment of an existing wonderful structure on 4th and Prendergast. We welcome everybody to come down. It's 305 East 4th Street.
Where is that roughly? What's the cross street? 305 East 4th Street.
4th Street and Prendergast
And
Avenue.
Prendergast, which is very well known and very easy to find.
That's right. And it's the building that's been, which is now the Robert H. Jackson Center, was previously known as the Scottish Rite Consistory.
Jackson Center, little known, it is a secret in Chautauqua County. I don't think very many people, if I said who's, Robert Jackson, they say who,
I think that's one of the baselines we used, was if you had taken a poll, and even our Jamestown area, when I started practice, you would have said Robert Jackson, and they all would have known he was an attorney from Jamestown. He was a Supreme Court justice, they're not sure when. and that
And he was president, so they called him Stonewall.
And it had something to do with Nuremberg, but they weren't sure what. I think in the last 5 years, as this Jackson Center has developed, and we've had such folks as Linda Brown of Brown versus Board of Education, we've had Chief Justice Rehnquist, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, Kenneth Starr, variety of folks who were at Nuremberg with Jackson. When they come back and tip the hat to this guy from Jamestown, New York, and you hear it from somebody from the outside, all of a sudden you pay attention. I think that's very normal. That here's a guy that never did go to college, attended only 1 year of law school, and is really the answer of a Jeopardy question. And now today, with the Hussein trial, the Milosevic trial, all those opportunities that there are for international rule of law, they all harken back to one thing, and that's the Nuremberg trial. We've had an opportunity to have a significant number of speakers at the Jackson Center over the last 5 years, and I make it a point that for archive purposes, we tape everything. In addition, I've made it a point to try and interview all these folks who've all had an opportunity to interface with Justice Jackson, either in his life at the Supreme Court or his life at Nuremberg, or just his life generally, so that we building up quite a substantial archive. Our goal at the Jackson Center, at least the first 5 years, is to create a mosaic. Who was this guy? To answer Reed's question, because most folks know the name but then draw a blank, I think hearing it from the story from individuals who were out in Washington, out in Germany, out in wherever it happens to be, come here, and by the way, they've been coming here without any hesitation or reservation, to talk about Jackson, with the end game being that we will be able to do a documentary sometime on Robert Jackson. I should point out, Reed, that last year, during the 60th anniversary commemoration of the Nuremberg trial, the American Experience, through PBS, did a phenomenal job on the history of the Nuremberg trial. And what they did was use Jackson's voice and personality, and we wove that through the entire 1 hour of the Nuremberg trial. If the Jackson Center had been given $1 million to do a documentary, we could not have done one better.
Now, who did this?
It's the public broadcast,
PBS.
the American Experience program.
I hope they rerun it.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Just phenomenal from the perspective of the Robert Jackson and the Robert Jackson Center. So much so that we paused and we obtained a grant and obtained copies, and now every school in Chautauqua County has that as...
Does the Westfield School have it?
Westfield School has it.
I'll borrow it from them. I'd like to see it.
And as coupled with a curriculum which talks about the Nuremberg trial that was developed by PBS. So it was phenomenal. So similarly, I'd like to do something along those lines with his biography, sort of an A&E type biography.
Sure. What do you have over the center that would attract people? Now, it's not a bunch of books, I know that. It's probably got some stuff there. What do you have?
Yeah, well, we have a display of Robert Jackson items and related items dealing with his life. His story is told, and in fact, this November 17th, we're going to actually open up our first part of our museum at the Jackson Center, so folks will have a chance to see displays of his life and times. We've got a very active kiosk system, so you can touch buttons and be able to work through Nuremberg trial and a little bit of Jackson's life.
Sort of interactive.
All interactive, big screen television, so you can see Jackson in action at Nuremberg. So there's quite a lot to see, and currently the mansion is all decorated. Well, what's been interesting is the interest outside of our area in Robert Jackson. Over the past year, there's been several activities commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Nuremberg trial. There seems to be in more interest in the trial now than probably ever, and that's principally due to what, as I mentioned, the Hussein Milosevic trial.
Who's Milosevic, in case some people don't?
Well, the Yugoslavian, he was the dictator in Yugoslavia, so...
He killed a whole bunch of people, too, right?
There was a lot of ethnic cleansing.
Murdered them.
And so he was tried in The Hague. As it turned out, he died during the course of his trial. One of them, we were in Nuremberg on the 60th anniversary of the commencement of the trial, that we and members of the Robert Jackson Society of about 50 folks from throughout the country, many from Chautauqua County, were actually in the courtroom during the commenced
That
60th
must have been
anniversary.
one heck of a...
It's phenomenal.
incredible, from all over the world, probably, huh?
All over the world, we were there, and we were the American delegate. And then we've had an opportunity to participate in programs in Syracuse University School of Law. We've been in Georgetown. We've had a chance to go to the Washington University School of Law. Bowling Green had a big event, but the end game is next week. A couple of us have been invited to go to Moscow for an event.
You going to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah, can't beat it. Off to Moscow. World traveler, Greg Peterson, doing the job, running the show over at the Jackson Center.
We've got a phenomenal staff that really makes it happen.
Terrific.
Yep.
Good show. Okay, guys, I want to thank some real special, wonderful people here. Hold those books up. So there's a couple good books on Jackson if you're interested, fella. I want to thank Chuck Kelsey. Chuck Kelsey developed this programming. He's done the engineering. He does everything. He comes down all week long, puts his stuff on the air. He gives many, many hours of his time every week. Chuck Kelsey invented television.